My Thomas Story Library, Fergus. This is the story of Fergus, a little traction engine who always liked to do things right. One day, I asked him to help Bill and Ben at the quarry, but poor Fergus wasn't used to their tricks. Read about the trouble they caused him. Fergus, the little blue traction engine, was the pride of the cement works. He loved his work. He knew all the rules and always stuck to them. One morning, he was chuffing cheerfully across the island of Sodor. He was on his way to do a special job for the Fat Controller. As Fergus reached the station, there stood Thomas. He was waiting for his passengers to board Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas gave a friendly peep peep on his whistle. "Hello, Fergus," he said. "I'm off to work in the quarry today," Fergus told Thomas proudly. "Watch out for Bill and Ben," Thomas warned. "They like to get up to mischief." "Thank you, Thomas. I won't let a couple of rascals get the better of me," wheezed Fergus. When Fergus arrived at the quarry, Mavis and the twins were waiting for him. Mavis was pleased that Fergus had come to help, and they set to work straight away. "I'm afraid the trucks are in a mess," she said. "Not to worry," puffed Fergus kindly. "We'll soon sort them out together." Bill and Ben grinned with delight. "Now we'll have some fun," whispered Ben. "We'll have the old boiler in a spin," steamed Bill. Fergus was happy working with Mavis. "She is a useful engine, just like me," he thought to himself. But Bill and Ben were not behaving like useful engines at all. Bill banged his truck so hard that some rocks fell out onto the track. "Steady!" called Fergus. "Do it right!" "I know what I'm doing," wheezed Bill. Then Ben left his trucks on the points so that Fergus couldn't get out of the siding. "You've boxed me in!" steamed Fergus. "Shift those trucks out of my way! Do it right!" But Ben just grinned. The next day, the works crew was blasting rock. The siren sounded to tell the engines that there was danger ahead. There was a loud boom, and a cloud of dust filled the air. "Wait for the all clear! Listen for the siren!" Fergus told Bill and Ben. "Do it right!" "There he goes again," said Bill. Do it right, it's all he tells us from morning until night." "Keep your big funnel out of our quarry," huffed Ben rudely. Later, the quarrymaster sent Bill and Ben to collect a new rock crusher from the harbour. Fergus spent a happy afternoon shunting trucks with Mavis. The quarry was a much more peaceful place without the twins around. At the harbour, Bill and Ben were still cross with Fergus. He's always telling us what to do," moaned Bill. "He always says do it right," said Ben. "Next time he tells us what to do," wheezed Bill. "We'll do it wrong," Ben said. With the rock crusher safely loaded onto a flat truck, Bill and Ben steamed back to the quarry as quickly as they could. The rock crusher was heavy. It made the rails shake all the way back. Fergus was waiting for Bill and Ben to arrive. "The blasting has made the rock face unsafe," he called to them. "Stay away! Do it right!" Bill and Ben didn't listen. They rattled their load towards the cliff as roughly as they could. Suddenly, loose rocks and stones began to fall from the rock face. "Look out!" wheezed Fergus. "Help!" wailed Bill and Ben together. Fergus steamed forward and banged Bill and Ben out of the way. His driver jumped clear just in time, but the falling rocks buried Fergus right up to his funnel. Mavis and the twins worked busily to carry away the rocks and rubble. It took a long time to dig poor Fergus out. No one worked harder than Bill and Ben to try and rescue No one worked harder than Bill and Ben to try and rescue the little traction engine. They didn't moan, and there were no tricks. They wanted to do things right. At last, Fergus was free. Bill and Ben were very ashamed of themselves. "We shouldn't have been so naughty," said Bill. "We're very sorry, Fergus," added Ben. "As long as we're friends again now," smiled Fergus. "Oh, yes," said the twins together. "Good," smiled Fergus. "From now on, we'll do things right together." My Thomas Story Library, Mighty Mac. This is a story about Mighty Mac, an engine with two faces. Mighty and Mac argued all the time, but one day they realized that if they didn't listen to each other, they could get into serious trouble. The island of Sodor is a very busy place in the summertime. Holidaymakers come from far and wide to sunbathe on the beaches and go for long walks in the beautiful hills. Thomas and his friends are kept very busy taking the holidaymakers from the docks to their campsites. Toot toot! Whistle the engines as they race along the many tracks that cross the island. The engines were so busy, the Fat Controller asked a new engine to come to the island and help with the holiday rush. The new engine's job would be to take holidaymakers to the mountain campsite. He had to be a very strong engine because the mountain track was very steep with lots of twists and turns. Thomas was waiting at the transfer yards to welcome the new engine. He whistled a big "Hello!" "Hello!" came the reply from the engine. It was followed very quickly by another "Hello!" Thomas looked from one end of the engine to the other. It had two faces. Thomas had never seen another engine like it. "I'm Mighty," puffed the boiler with a curl on his head. "And I'm Mac," puffed the boiler with freckles. "Together we are Mighty Mac," they both puffed at once. "Mighty Mac," called Mr. Percival, the Fin Controller, "you are to take those holidaymakers to their mountain campsite." "But how will we get to the holidaymakers?" groaned Mighty. "They are on the other side of the yard." There were never so many tracks in the shunting yard we used to work in," moaned Mac. Luckily, Thomas was there to help them. "It's simple," he whistled. "Look where you want to go, then follow the track that will take you there." Mighty Mac looked at the tracks. Mighty began to chuff carefully in one direction. Mac had other ideas. "You are going the wrong way!" he puffed, trying to pull back along a different track. "No, it's this way!" chugged Mighty, pushing Mac along another track. Very soon they were going backwards and forwards along the tracks. They even had a ride on the turntable. But they didn't seem to be getting any closer to the holidaymakers. "We're here!" Mighty suddenly whistled. "Oh, really?" chuffed Mac. Then why are the passengers over there?" Mighty Mac looked across the tracks at the holidaymakers still waiting on the platform. Mighty Mac certainly wasn't a really useful engine. "Now you are late!" said Mr. Percival angrily. "Follow me," puffed Thomas. He showed Mighty Mac how to cross over to the holidaymakers. "We'll have to work extra hard," chuffed Mighty Mac. "We have to get to the campsite before it gets dark." Mighty Mac chugged quickly up the mountain track. "This way!" puffed Mighty when they came to a fork in the track. He began to follow the left track. "No, it's this way!" called Mac, but Mighty didn't listen. "It's this way!" puffed Mac crossly, and he pulled and pushed Mighty along another track. "Be careful!" cried the holidaymakers, who were being bumped and bounced inside the carriage. Suddenly, Mighty Mac came to a dead end. Mighty and Mac had been too busy arguing to pay attention to where the campsite was. Some rocks had fallen on the track, and Mighty Mac couldn't go any further. "This isn't our campsite," said the holidaymakers. "This is your fault," puffed Mac, giving Mighty a shove. "No, it's yours," chugged Mighty, shoving him back. Little by little, Mighty Mac's shoving and pushing began to nudge the carriage until they were bumping so quickly they knocked the carriage off the rails. "We'll never get to the campsite now," grumbled the holidaymakers. "This is your fault," Mighty told Mac. "No, it's your fault," Mac was sure. 1, 2, 3, push! The holidaymakers were working together to get the carriage back on the tracks. Mighty Mac watched them helping each other. "Okay, you lead this time, Mac," said Mighty. "Let's go down the track so the passengers can couple me to the carriage." "Good idea! Let's work together," puffed Mac. "Well done!" cheered the holidaymakers. When Mighty and Mac worked together, they found they could do anything. Mighty could see the flag flying high above the campsite at the bottom of the mountain. "Let's go!" he whistled. "Hold on," said Mac. "Which way is it to the campsite?" "Remember what Thomas told us?" puffed Mighty brightly. "Look where you want to go," puffed Mac. "Then follow the track that will take you there," chuffed Mighty. "You know, Mac," wheezed Mighty, "when we pull together and work together, we can be a really useful engine," whistled Mac, and they set off happily back down the mountain. My Thomas Story Library, Harvey. This is a story about Harvey the crane engine. When he arrived on Sodor, the engines all thought he looked a bit strange. They didn't really want him to join my railway. But Harvey soon proved that being different can be good. The engines on the Fat Controller's Railway love working at Brendam Docks. There is always lots of jobs for them to do, and they enjoy welcoming the new arrivals onto the island. Today, Cranky the Crane was unloading an exciting new arrival. It was very heavy. "This makes my chain ache!" groaned Cranky. "This is Harvey, the crane engine," said the Fat Controller proudly. The other engines thought Harvey looked strange. Harvey was very happy to be on the ground. He didn't like dangling from Cranky's arm. Harvey was soon joined by some more rivals. "These gentlemen are the railway board," said the Fat Controller. "Tomorrow, Harvey will give them a demonstration. If it goes well, he will join the railway." "What's a demonstration?" asked Percy quietly. "Demonstration," said Thomas. "It's when you show off what you can do." "Like when Thomas and I have a race," said Bertie. That evening, when Thomas returned to the engine sheds, he saw Harvey parked nearby. Harvey could hear the other engines talking about him. "Harvey's different," said Henry. "He doesn't even look like an engine," agreed Edward. "Surely the Fat Controller won't let him pull coaches," sniffed Gordon. "He's just Cranky on wheels," said James. "He's not taking my mail," peeped Percy. This made Harvey feel very sad. He had been excited about coming to the island and meeting the engines on the Fat Controller's railway. Thomas felt sorry for Harvey. "Don't worry, Harvey. Sometimes it takes time to make new friends," he said. But Harvey wasn't sure that he wanted to stay where no one wanted him. The next morning, the Fat Controller sent the engines off to do a useful day's work. Maybe my coming here wasn't such a good idea, sir, Harvey chuffed sadly. Nonsense, said the Fat Controller. But the engines don't like me. I'm too different, replied Harvey. Being different is what makes you special, smiled the Fat Controller. And that made Harvey feel better. Out on the branch line, Percy was having trouble with the trucks. Faster we go! Faster we go! Pull him along! Don't let him slow! Sang the trucks as they pulled Percy along the track. Help! Cried Percy as he gathered speed. Percy's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. Percy went off the rails at Bulgy's bridge. Luckily, Percy managed to stop at the top of the hill, so no one was hurt. But the troublesome trucks went tumbling down the hillside. Ah! They cried as they bumped and rolled towards the road. The trucks were in a terrible mess. Just then, Bertie arrived to discover some of the troublesome trucks in the road. Bertie was pleased that Percy was all right, but he was also very cross. He was taking the gentleman of the railway board to the demonstration. You've blocked the road! He snapped. Bertie was worried that he wouldn't get the railway board to the demonstration on time. When the Fat Controller heard the news about Percy, he went straight to Harvey. I need you to rescue one of my engines, he said. I'll do my best, sir, Harvey said bravely, and he set off immediately. Harvey soon arrived at the bridge and went to work. He swung his crane arm round, and his hook was coupled to Percy. Then Harvey carefully lifted Percy up the hill. The Fat Controller was watching Harvey from the roadside with the gentleman of the railway board. In no time, Percy was back on the tracks. Thank you, Harvey, he peeped happily. The gentlemen of the railway board were very impressed. That was the best demonstration of all, said the Fat Controller cheerfully. The gentlemen of the railway board have decided that you shall join the railway. Oh, thank you, sir, said Harvey proudly, and he set to work pulling up the troublesome trucks from the road. That night, Harvey heard the engines talking again. This time, it was different. Well done, Harvey, said Gordon. Very useful, said James. You can take my mail, said Percy. You see, said Thomas, different can be good. All the engines agreed. Welcome to the Sodor Railway, they tooted, and Harvey smiled happily. My Thomas Story Library, Rusty. This is a story about Rusty the little diesel engine, who is best friends with Skarloey and Renes. Rusty works so hard looking after their line that sometimes he forgets there's work to be done at the quarry. One autumn evening, Rusty returned late to the quarry. The Fat Controller was cross. I'm sorry, sir, said Rusty. I was helping Renes and Skarloey on their line. Their line is in bad condition, the Fat Controller explained. Mending it takes up too much of your time. I am going to shut down the line. Rusty was very upset. Renes and Skarloey will come and work here at the quarry with you, said the Fat Controller. He had made up his mind. The line was closed down the very next day, and Renes and Skarloey arrived at the quarry to work there instead. They worked as hard as they could, but they missed the forests and hills along their mountain line. Most of all, though, they missed their passengers. Rusty could see they were not happy. The next day, the Fat Controller came to the quarry with some important news. We are going to be blasting here for the next 2 weeks, he said. It won't be safe for you. I will find work for you to do somewhere else. Please, sir, said Rusty. May we go back to the old line and try to repair it? Then Renez and Scarloey can do their old jobs again. The Fat Controller agreed, but you must be back at the quarry in 2 weeks' time, he warned the engines. Renez and Scarloey's line was in a mess. It was covered with rocks and branches, and the tracks were broken in several places. The three little engines set to work straight away. There is no time to lose, said Rusty. When Elizabeth the vintage lorry puffed past, she thought Rusty's plan to clear the tracks was silly. What a waste of time, she sniffed. Scarloey was sad. He's right, he said. We'll never get all the work done in 2 weeks. We can't give up, said Rusty. The days passed, and still the line was not fixed. The engines worked harder than ever, but time was running out. It's no good, cried Renez. There's too much to do, moaned Scarloey. But Rusty would not give up. He had a very clever idea. The next day, Rusty saw Elizabeth trundling by. If only we had a lorry to help us, he said loudly. Elizabeth stopped. I couldn't possibly help you, she said. I'm a quarry lorry. Well, we need a very special lorry, Rusty teased. One that can haul and pull heavy branches. I am a very special lorry, snorted Elizabeth. I can haul and pull, she said proudly. So you'll do it? Said Rusty. I will, smiled Elizabeth. Elizabeth was as good as her word. She hauled rubbish and pulled branches from the line. She helped remove a fallen tree from the cattle crossing. The little lorry puffed up and down, helping the engines until all the work was done. Together, they had finished the repairs with a day to spare. Thank you, Elizabeth, said Rusty. We couldn't have done it without you, said Renez and Scarloey together. You are a very special lorry. I know, puffed Elizabeth importantly. Rusty's crew finished sweeping up until everything was spick and span. The line had never looked so splendid. Then Rusty's driver telephoned the Fat Controller, who promised to inspect the line the next morning. When the Fat Controller arrived, he was very pleased. Well done, Rusty, he said, and well done, Elizabeth. We will reopen the line straight away. Rusty was very proud. Renez and Scarloey were very happy too. They were looking forward to seeing their passengers again. Now you will have time to work at the quarry for a change, the Fat Controller told Rusty. Renez and Scarloey went back to work on their old line, and Rusty went to the quarry. Rusty and Elizabeth have become firm friends. Each time Elizabeth visits the quarry, she greets Rusty with a friendly toot toot on her horn. She thinks Rusty is very special too. My Thomas Story Library, Molly. This is a story about Molly, a bright yellow engine. Molly didn't think she was very special because she only pulled empty trucks. But one night, Molly realized just how useful she was. It was a blustery evening on the island of Sodor. Thomas was passing through one of his favorite stations. Toot toot! Called Thomas to the station master. Thomas liked this station because every evening the station master put up lots of lanterns all along the platform. But Thomas was also busy thinking about the next day. I wonder what Molly, the new engine, will be like, he chuffed. When Thomas pulled into Brendam Docks the next morning, he spotted Molly straight away. She was waiting in a siding looking very sad. What's the matter? Puffed Thomas. Emily made fun of me because I have to take empty trucks to the coaling plant, replied Molly sadly. Just then, the signal turned to red. Gordon thundered past with the express. You wait there, he chuffed. My express is more important than your empty trucks. Molly chugged off very sadly. As Thomas wondered what he could do, the wind blew over some containers covered in tarpaulin. The tarpaulin began to rustle. That's it, puffed Thomas happily, and raced off to find Molly. With the help of Molly's driver, Thomas and Molly covered her trucks with a tarpaulin. With your trucks covered, no one will know they are empty, explained Thomas. We'll make them think you are carrying a very special delivery. Thomas spent a busy day telling everyone about Molly's special. Percy and Edward were talking to Thomas in Knapford Station when Gordon pulled in. I don't care what you say, Thomas, puffed Gordon. Nothing can be as important as my express. It can, shouted Thomas angrily. Be at Abbey Station tonight, and you will see just how special Molly's special is. As the engines pulled away, Thomas realised what he had said. How am I going to make Molly's special even more special? Thomas chuffed thoughtfully. He pulled into his favourite station just as the station master was lighting his lanterns. This gave Thomas another idea. Can I borrow your lanterns? He puffed. Although the station master was a little curious, he was happy to lend Thomas his lanterns. Thomas loaded up his trucks and sped off. That evening, Molly waited for Thomas at the coaling plant. Hello, Molly, puffed Thomas happily. I have another idea about how to make your special even more special. And Thomas told Molly all about his plan. Very soon, Molly was covered in lanterns and heading happily for Abbey Station. Toot toot! Whistled Percy and Emily as Molly arrived at the station. I feel very special, chuffed Molly with a big smile on her face. Thank you, Thomas. Suddenly, a big gust of wind blew right through the station. It lifted the tarpaulin covering Molly's empty trucks and blew out the lanterns. Everyone could see that there was nothing underneath. I knew your trucks couldn't be as important as my express, chuffed Gordon, smiling. Molly screeched out of the station. She wanted to be as far away from all the other engines as possible. Well, chuffed Emily. What are you going to do now, Thomas? Poor Molly, you have just made her look very silly. Thomas, the station master called across the platform. Where's Molly? The Fat Controller has just phoned. There are engines waiting at the coaling plant. They need Molly's empty trucks so they can deliver the coal. Thomas raced out of the yard looking for Molly. He went all round the island. Eventually, he found Molly stopped in a siding. I'm very sorry, apologised Thomas, but I have some really good news, he chuffed merrily. Your empty trucks are very important. They need them at the coaling plant right now. But I've nearly run out of coal, sobbed Molly, more upset than before. Don't worry, chuffed Thomas. I'll help you. Okay, Thomas, you push and I'll pull, puffed Molly. Very soon, the two engines were working together to get Molly and her empty trucks to the coaling plant. The coaling plant engines were very glad to see Molly and her empty trucks. Quick, quick, they chugged. We need to start our deliveries and we need your empty trucks to carry the coal. Look how important your trucks are, puffed Thomas. Molly looked around at her trucks being used to help the coaling plant engines and thought how special an engine she was. She was so proud it made her axles tingle. More trucks! More trucks! Called out Henry, one of the coaling plant engines. Without a moment's thought, Molly rushed past Thomas whistling, "I'll get more trucks!" Molly couldn't wait to begin pulling empty trucks again. "And I'll help," puffed Thomas. Molly and Thomas raced back to the yard to pick up some more trucks. Just as they were leaving the yard with their empty trucks, the signal turned to red. But this time, Gordon and his express had to wait. "Out of the way!" puffed Molly. "Empty trucks coming through!" "You see," laughed Thomas, "sometimes empty trucks are more important than your express." Molly felt even more special. Now she knew what it was like to be a really useful engine. She was never going to feel bad about pulling empty trucks again.